How's it going? So today we are going to look at episode 8, the season finale of season 2 of House of the Dragon. We start off with Tywin Lannister meeting with the Triarchy, and they make a point of showing this very otherworldly sort of environment compared to what Tywin is used to, sitting in the Green Council, mostly being ignored or berated by the Prince Regent. And instead we go to this meeting with the 33 councillors that we previously discussed, representing each of the 3 free cities that make up the Triarchy, so Myr, Lys and Tyrosh. Tywin is having this discussion with the 3 main representatives of each of the free cities, and they're trying to negotiate terms that are favourable enough to both of them, whereby the Greens are able to secure an alliance with the Triarchy, and that the Triarchy are able to secure mostly material gain. It seems to be what they're looking for from the Greens. And obviously by sending a Lannister over, you're going to assume that you're going to get some type of material benefit from striking up a deal with them. So they initially suggest that they want 100 gold dragons, which is a lot of money per man that they send. And obviously they have a massive fleet that have to be, manned with a massive number of seafarers and fighters. And so this is completely out of the budget for Tywin. And obviously we found out, in the past few episodes too, that the Crown has not been making the best financial decisions, and that King's Landing is obviously having its trade affected by the blockade, and also the fact that they're having to sustain a war effort and the financial implications of that. So they definitely don't have the money to, give 100 gold dragons per man to the Triarchy. And so instead, one of the negotiators for the Triarchy suggests that they would like the stepstones. And Tywin is like, this is a very disputed land, and tries to make all these excuses to not have to part with the stepstones. But the Triarchy are negotiating terms and say essentially, we would ensure that there would be no war here, and that we would essentially want control over the trade here, and that we would simply impose a tariff or a tax on the trade that goes through here, the ships that go through here, and for the goods being exchanged. Eventually he agrees to this deal. It is favourable for both of them, but he does say the Prince Regent could have me hanged for this, to which one of these pirate princes of the 3 free cities suggests, with the fleet we send you, you could topple the regent and sit the throne yourself. And so does that not just perfectly underpin every single theme of hubris that we have been exploring for the past 8 episodes? Everyone is coming for this Iron Throne through some complete delusions of grandeur, and to highlight it like this by, these folks in Essos that aren't even involved, it's a nice way of capturing everything that's going on here. And then we're introduced to Admiral Lohar. And now, something I just want to, say from the jump, I don't know what pronouns we are supposed to be using in reference to this character, because they introduce the character with male pronouns, but in the behind the episode they were talking about the character using female pronouns, and obviously the actress is female, she's a trans woman, and so, it's unclear what pronouns that we're supposed to be using, and so I'm going to be using they them pronouns throughout this until we get some more clarification, because clearly there's not a unilateral consensus on this within the show production itself at the time being. And so we get introduced to this character, and they're said to be highly respected by all of the seafarers that sail alongside them, and their men essentially will not commit to fighting on behalf of someone unless Lohar is pleased with the alliance that's being made. And so they're introduced to Thailand, and there's a very comedic exchange. He really is just the punching bag of the season. God bless this man, but God, we love seeing a Lannister humbled. And so they essentially agree that some sort of engagement will be arranged in which Tywin must best Admiral Lohar to gain their respect, and therefore the respect of their men. So then we have this shot that we've seen in the trailer for the episode where Aemond is on the back of Vhagar and they are overlooking a burning city. And there was a lot of speculation of where the city would be. Turns out that it is Sharp Point, which is essentially, if you look at the map of Westeros, is like the first landmass castle that you will meet once you fly over from Dragonstone, over the top of Dragonstone, Driftmark. It's essentially the first castle that you see. So he really did come away from that engagement where he had to flee a battle with Rhaenyra and her new band of dragon riders. He essentially went and had the first castle that he's seen out of complete rage and burned thousands of people. And so we really see that there is just this complete descent into typical Targaryen madness, you know, the flip of the coin. Yet so we see that he has completely abandoned any sort of compassion for the small folk, not that he ever had any, but burns thousands, has no sympathy for anyone, clearly is unfit to rule, cannot contain his temper, his rage, his reactionary behaviour, and so, you know, this impulsivity later gets him scolded by his mother. Then we get this scene between Larys and Aegon. And, you know, initially it's between Aegon and Orwyle. Aegon is requesting some rum to dull his pain, you know, typical. Like, we've seen enough of that in season 1, did we not? But this time he actually has some real physical pain that probably could help, you know, instead of just the emotional pain that he was suppressing from, you know, not being his mother's favourite and his father kind of not acknowledging that he existed his whole life until supposedly his deathbed, but even then he didn't care about him at all. You know, a lot to reckon with. So he is sitting with these, you know, very immense injuries, and Orwyle is preparing him some sort of salve, some sort of tea of sorts to take some of the pain away. Doesn't seem to be milk of the poppy. I think he is ignoring Aemond's suggestion that he should essentially keep him hopped up in milk of the poppy and a bit delusional, and is instead favouring Larys's suggestion that he should not be taking milk of the poppy and instead should be working on keeping his mind clear, and that this clarity of mind will help him recover sooner, which is in the, you know, in the interest of both Larys and Orwyle, considering Prince Aemond has clearly gone off the rails. Nobody wants him in charge anymore, and to do that they need to get Aegon back on his feet. And so that's kind of what this conversation ends up being about. There's a really sweet exchange between Aegon and Orwyle before Orwyle leaves when Larys enters, and he states to Orwyle, "You're a good man." And I think he is. I think he is quite impartial, and I think he's really just there trying to do his job and trying to practice his craft of medicine and of healing, and I think this is quite representative of that. So, good man, probably, yeah. He does a lot to help Alicent too, and you know, he really doesn't benefit much himself from helping any of these people, but he still does it. So I think he's one of the few in the show that we could probably lend that title to, even if only for a moment. And we have this exchange where Larys is talking about how they have to leave King's Landing and not return for some time because the Pretender has raised 3 dragons, 3 dragon riders, and that Aemond is enraged and there's no telling what he'll do. And Aegon is like, well, what was the point in all this then? And is kind of like gesturing down to, you know, his body, his leg, acknowledging his injuries and saying, you know, I got injured so severely to the point where I will never be the same again, and I'm essentially not going to have benefited. You know, it's almost as if his overthrow is inevitable if this is the circumstance. He's wondering why the rage of his brother is really going to impact him all this much, and then Larys suggests it's because Aemond will kill you. Aegon then suggests that he would take to the throne, and he as king would then punish Aemond and imprison him, that there would be some sort of repercussion for his actions. Larys kind of acknowledges that this might not be the most realistic plan given his current condition, and you know, Aegon obviously recognises that Aemond is about crazy enough that he would try and kill him, and that Aemond would only benefit from committing such an act anyway. And so Larys turns around, and again we get suggestion about essentially the finances of the Strong family and of Harrenhal, and he suggests that basically since he killed his family, he has moved the finances from being in Harrenhal to the Iron Bank of Bravos, you know, instead of moving it to Old Town, which is quite interesting. He instead moves it to the Iron Bank in Bravos, with the idea that it's probably a bit more secure than having it in Westeros, but also almost as if he was preparing for something like this, almost as if he wanted to have things in place in case something like this started to go down, just so that he would be in a position where he could offer some sort of salvation, some sort of solace, a solution to the king that, would also enable him to further isolate him. If he was to get the king to Bravos, he would have ultimate control over the king, and also through forging this relationship and offering, these solutions and acting as this sort of savior to the king, that he would be in a position then where the king would have ultimate trust in him, would owe him in some way, like we've seen in season 1, the fact that he went and killed his family, and then he kind of held that over Alicent to get favors from her because she, quote unquote, felt like she owed him something, or he acted like she owed him something, and that he could kind of use that as a threat and use the threat of exposing that as a way to keep power over her and to keep her in line with his intentions of what he wanted and with his desires and his ambitions. And so we kind of see something similar to this happening here. He suggests they run away to Bravos and Aegon, much like when his sister was propositioned by Criston Cole to run away to Essos. He is like, what is the point? What's the point in me doing that? And Larys is like, well, is it better not to live? And Aegon is like, I don't know if it's better to live. He says, my dragon is dead. I am burned and crippled. I cannot reproduce because of my physical state. And so obviously he can produce an heir. But again, at the same time, it's almost as if he's talking about this as if it's like a sacrificial castration that is the result of this sort of karmic energy that obviously we know that he raped Diana in season 1. And we know that he has been committing multiple sexual misdeeds and infidelities against his wife. He's been producing illegitimate children that have then ended up in fighting pits. And so his sexual depravity has, a lot of what makes him so cruel and unlikable is his sexual depravity and his treatment towards women. And so he's talking about that he has lost function of his secondary sexual characteristics, and that, essentially he will not be able to produce children. He will not be able to experience the euphoric pleasures that he has been indulging in. And so he's kind of like that, alongside the fact that his dragon is dead and that he is burned and crippled. He is like, well, what is the point? And I think this is very curious because he talks about his dragon being dead. And obviously we heard from Criston Cole that Sunfire was left at Rook's Rest, long in the dying, whatever that's supposed to mean. That man is always talking in riddles. He can never just say something and just make sense. God bless him. But anyway, it's interesting because we don't exactly know what happened to Sunfire, but I think it's safe to say that Sunfire is not dead. And I can say that with my whole chest with absolute confidence because they're not going to kill a dragon off screen. 100,000,000%. And so Sunfire is definitely alive, definitely at Rook's Rest, recovering, and we'll hopefully check in early season 3 and get some sort of update in this. But I feel that Aegon probably thinks his dragon's dead because others are probably telling him. And I imagine that as much as his dragon bond seemed to be very, very close, he also could not speak Valyrian to his dragon and didn't really seem to spend a lot of time with Sunfire that we've seen anyway. And so it may be that this psychic connection, and especially because of the distance as well, like obviously he's in King's Landing, Sunfire's at Rook's Rest, and so perhaps this proximity is making it difficult for him to be able to like psychically tune in to his dragon bond with Sunfire to establish whether or not Sunfire is still alive. And he is currently just having to go on the word of people who are at Rook's Rest who obviously seen Sunfire plummet into the ground and crashing into the forest, and they're making the assumption that Sunfire died. But we obviously know it's not going to be the case, because not only are they not going to kill a dragon off screen, but Sunfire is supposed to play a bigger part and so this will be quite a significant deviation from the books. I mean, obviously, given this whole episode, they're not afraid of doing that, but I think it would just be a bit more complicated. Like, they would have to work in too many different alternatives, and it would be, you know, too many somersaults to try and make it all make sense. So I imagine we're going to get a surprise reveal that Sunfire's actually fine. Then this is the first shot of the episode of poor Rhaena running around the Vale looking for Sheepstealer. She couldn't have just went on the gay band in the Pentos. She had to stick around to look for this formidable and wild dragon. I'm gonna group together all of the frantic shots of her searching. So obviously there was 3 before we finally get a shot of her facing down with Sheepstealer, presumably, at the end of the episode. And so within these 3 shots, they're kind of sporadically edited in throughout other scenes throughout the episode. But this is the first of which, and she is seen frantically running around looking for the dragon, but then she sees a stream and she goes over and starts drinking water like she's literally never seen water before in her life. And, you know, it kind of begs the question, how long has she been running around out here? Why is no one looking for her? Like, surely, I mean, it's not like this is a heavily or densely forested place. I mean, I get that it's quite mountainous and rocky, but it's relatively open area and open plain, so if anyone's looking for her, they should be able to find her realistically quite easily, and especially the fact she doesn't really know where she's going, so she should be easily found if there were any search parties, but there are none. We don't see a single person looking for her this whole episode. She really has just run off, and those what was it, 6 nights that Lady Jane Arryn sent really didn't do a whole lot of protecting. Really didn't. And, you know, she's frantically drinking the water from this stream. It's obvious that she has not really been eating, not been drinking, not been sleeping. You really have to question, is it worth it? And the next shot that we see, she is lying on the ground, sleeping outside and shivering, and looks like death warmed up, but not all that warm. Death look warmed up. Again, she's just really suffering, really sacrificing her own comfort, which obviously she would be used to her princessly comforts, being a royal and having always grown up in a comfortable situation. Now she's having to go out and, you know, go without food, without water, without sleep, you know, without shelter. And it's almost as if they really are trying to pass over the Nettles storyline. Again, minor spoilers. Nettles is obviously lowborn, and so it's almost as if this is her first and only experience of what it will be like to have nothing. And she is experiencing this in pursuit of something that would be life-changing, something that would make her feel legitimized, something that would, you know, improve her standing in her household and with her family, with her father, and that she feels like put her on a level with her sister, something that she has longed for her whole life, that she is now trying to go out and seize, which is having a dragon bond, being a dragon rider. And so it's going to be interesting to see if this pays off or not, because obviously we are left on a cliffhanger at the end of this. But in the third vision, she does see Sheepstealer flying around in the Vale, and she does run to see if she can see him, and then we'll get to that at the end of the episode. So then we get the scene with Hugh and Ulf in the painted table hall in Dragonstone, and Ulf's kind of doing this this is the life, isn't it, Hugh? Like, this is what we deserve, you know. You can already see that his character is going from being quite likeable in the last episode, when he was being severely humbled by the utter chaos that was being rained down upon them by these dragons. He has become very unlikable in this episode. Very unlikable. And the fact that he's flying our beautiful baby girl Silverwing, I'm disgusted for her. I want this man dead. Just so it's simple, not because I hate him that much that I want him dead, but I hate him enough that I want him dead so Silverwing can bond with literally anybody else. Please bring Rhaena back, stick her on Silverwing. Come on, like, make our life better, I beg. Anyway, so he is being really cocky and has this like attitude about himself now that he is like larger than life. He's really assuming this godlike idea about himself in his narcissism following the claiming of a dragon. And, you know, Hugh is not saying too much. He is being a lot more humble, and obviously he just seen his dragon devour scores of people, burn others, and obviously recognises the responsibility and the power that comes along with this. And he seems like he is trying to reckon with that in a much different way than Ulf is, where Ulf is clearly letting the power go to his head immediately. But then Jace comes in and Ulf is sitting at the head of the painted table with his feet on it, and he tells him to get his feet off the table, obviously, because hello, the disrespect. You've been here for 5 minutes. Like, we don't, just pack it in. So he tells him to get his feet off the table, and he calls Jace boy. He's like, yeah, why? And Hugh has to kind of intervene and explain that this is the prince and heir, Jace Velaryon. And all of a sudden, Ulf takes his feet off the table and he gets up and he's like, oh, sorry, I didn't realise. Which is absolutely hilarious to me, because he was sitting in the bar earlier on this season and he was hyping up his connection to the Targaryen family, to all his wee friends, and he was talking about how, like, Rhaenyra is his niece and her true born son and heir, Jace Velaryon, is like, and then he gets over to Dragonstone, claims the dragon, does nothing but be disrespectful to Rhaenyra, which you can really see in the dining scene later on, that like supper scene with the dragon seeds. Disrespectful to Rhaenyra, does not care at all about her legitimacy, does not care, does not respect her power, and he is super disrespectful to Jace repeatedly throughout the episode, but this being their first like one-on-one real conflict with each other, and the fact that he had to have it explained to him, this is Jace, by Hugh, and Hugh and Adam never really, like, Ulf tried to explain that he had this, you know, Targaryen connection to Baelon, and obviously that then Viserys and Daemon would be his half-brothers, and then he talks about the, you know, true heir and queen Rhaenyra. He talks about her true-born heir Jaceres, and so, you know, he makes his allegiance very, very clear that he is Team Black, supposedly. Whereas Adam never really makes it super clear. Obviously he does claim for her, and he does seem to be true and honest in what he says, and obviously we love Adam, and we love Clinton Liberty, we love good Irish men getting good fantasy roles, and we believe this man. We believe every word that he says. He is a true and honest man, and we believe him until we don't, but for now we believe him. There's obviously that relationship. Obviously he is toys in service to the Sea Snake and the Velaryon family, and so he is by default kind of connected to Rhaenyra anyway. And then we have Hugh, who we seen petition Aegon earlier on in the season, and, you know, basically defend the words that Aegon said to him during that petition, when his wife kind of contested, like, listen, you're not being paid by the crown, like, you need to stop being so loyal to them. He maintains, no, the king Aegon said he was going to provide, and so I believe him. And he was obviously, especially given the circumstances too, he didn't really have a choice because he's a blacksmith and he's obviously in service to the crown, but he was Team Green and has now kind of turned cloak to Team Black, and so there's a lot more contemplative scenes with him than there is with Ulf. So yeah, Ulf was the only one of the three that was really, really banging on about how he was Team Black, and now he's come over and he's done nothing but be disrespectful, where the other two have been respectful. And so I just think that's very interesting. He then goes over and hugs Jace, and Jace literally looks like he's ready to die. Obviously he dislikes these people anyway. He was calling them mongrels in the last episode, and was talking about how he was concerned that these base-born silver-haired Targaryens who were now dragon riders were going to come for his inheritance. He's absolutely disgusted. He's like, get this man off me. And Ulf then goes to touch his hair, and it made me so uncomfortable, this whole scene, like the amount of like unwanted physical contact between this man and the prince and heir. Jace was having none of it, so he then goes to touch his hair, and Jace is like, ducks back. He's like, what are you doing? And he's like, look at that hair, it's as dark as they say. After Jace's whole scene in the last episode talking about how insecure he was because the evidence is here for all to see, like this sitting gesture into the fact, you know, did you think I was going to have dark hair when you betted Harwin Strong? Did you think I would favour him? Like, he is looking at himself in the mirror like, she done me in with his hair. Like, everything else I could have passed it off, it's the hair. And the fact that Ulf then is like, it's as dark as they say, as if like everyone's going around talking about, oh, he's just dark hair, like look at him, like he's clearly not a Targaryen, make it out that everyone's talking about him. And the fact that this was their first proper interaction, and the first thing he does is try and reach for his hair to be like, wow, it's so dark. Jace is disgusted. He is absolutely revolted by this man. And, you know, he's clearly being nothing but an inconvenience anyway. And so he's talking about how, like, we have bestowed upon you this absolute gift of dragon riding. It's a sacred inheritance that you pay no mind to. And he turns around and he tells them of what happened in Sharp Point, obviously, that Aemond went and burned it to the ground and murdered everyone that he physically could. And he's like, and you're sitting here acting like this, and we're in the middle of fighting a war, and you want to act foolish. Like, this is not the time, this is not the place, and we do not need dragon riders who are going to be behaving like this, so you need to get yourself in check. And he says, if you hinder our efforts through sloth, I will have you hanged and your body fed to the dogs in the street. And you know what? Fair play to him. I really like this scene from Jace. He was kind of given Daemon vibes, but it worked for him. He's obviously trying to intimidate these men though, and these are like grown men that are common born, and they've seen and experienced a lot more than this boy princeling has. And so there's only so far his threats are really going to take them, because they're also currently sitting on two of the biggest dragons on Team Black's side. So he's obviously like, you know, like, what are you going to do to me? I have a bigger dragon. I've loved more life than you. The only thing he is over them is his heirhood. And then he's making a mockery of his dark hair. I can't. This whole scene is just so upsetting for Jace. And for us as an audience watching, having just seen the scene with Jace and Rhaenyra in the last episode. But yeah, I like this insult. I liked him really going for Ulf's throat. I think we need more of that. He made me so angry in this episode. He was so disrespectful. Then we get a nice little scene between Rhaenyra and Corlys. It probably should have been a bigger conflict than this. Probably, given they haven't really spoken since Rhaenys' death. But lo and behold, anyway, we get a scene. She is talking about the new dragon riders, obviously because she knows that Adam was in the employ of the sea snake. And so she's like, I can't speak to the character of the new riders, which is ironic that it's just following this scene of Hugh and Ulf, where Ulf is being absolutely insufferable and Hugh is kind of keeping his mouth closed. And she's kind of like, she's asking about Adam and about his character, and the sea snake is kind of like, yeah, no, you know, I've asked around, I've heard that he's a good guy. And again, it's like just this repeated denial of the fact, like, these are your sons. Like, at some point you're just going to have to accept it, because it's just going to make it more difficult in the long run then if you're like, oh, by the way, these are my sons, and I just kind of lied about it. I just kind of kept that, you know, hidden and concealed from the crown and from the council, when, you know, this might be a bit more beneficial, you know, and maybe they could come to some sort of solution about how to make life easier for you. I don't know, by legitimizing them, but sure, whatever. So essentially they have the Adam conversation, and then they start talking about the need to essentially strike while Aemond's gone and to go for the beast of the head. They kind of have this discussion about the fact that Daemon and Helaena are still factors. They do still have dragon riders, but, you know, they're not really much of a threat. And Rhaenyra kind of reinforces the fact that Helaena doesn't really have it in her nature to go out and burn people, which we see referenced later in the episode. And then they're talking about the ship, because obviously we have seen that pretty much this whole season Corlys' ship, the Sea Snake, has been laid up and has been getting worked on it, you know, after the incident at the end of season 1 that left him in a bad way, left the ship in a bad way, and so his ship's been getting repairs done. And, you know, he says it's better now than it ever was. The Lannisters and Hightowers better beware, and any fleet that they try to bring with them. And then he says that he renamed his ship because he recognises that the old name was just kind of a reference to his historic deeds and, you know, things from his youth and things that he was proud of then, and how the sea snake doesn't really represent what he wants, you know, his strong, formidable fleet to represent now. And he says that he renamed it to the Queen Who Never Was. Rhaenyra thanks him, obviously not just for this, but in a wider framework of thanking him for still being by her side despite all that's happened, and for accepting her offer of Hand of the Queen. And then he says, "What I do now, I do for her," which is obviously a reference to the last scene that he was on with Baela, where she said, you know, about the Hall of the Nine and everything that he'd brought back from his voyages, and how everyone marvelled at these things, and she said, "I wonder if they all knew that you did it for her." Now we go to Harrenhal, and obviously Daemon's been amassed in Riverland's forces. We see that he's talking to this man as part of the army that he's amassing whenever he's walking around, and the only thing that's notable about, well, I'm sure there's plenty notable to anybody else that really is digging into the scene with a fine-tooth comb, but I think the most significant thing about this is that they're making a point of differentiating that Araxes prefers pig to sheep, which I think is interesting because he's just a quirky little boy anyway, you know, so it just, like, it gives him another quirk, another idiosyncrasy that these dragons that have been generalized to favour these things that he does not, he favours something else. And so, interesting boy. It's nice to even get a reference to him because we haven't seen very much of him this whole season. God bless him. He's just been lying in the stones out in the garden, occasionally gnawing on a weirwood and getting some terrifying visions, I'm sure. We get the announcement then that Sir Alfred Broome has arrived at Harrenhal after his long trek from Dragonstone, when Rhaenyra asked him to go over and see what Daemon's doing, see if he's amassing forces for her or for himself. And so Alfred Broome shows up and Daemon's like, "What do you think of the new army?" And Alfred Broome's like, "It's very large." Like, wow, good job. And then he's talking about how he kind of like needs to speak to Daemon in private, more or less. And Daemon's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Takes him out to the Godswood of Harrenhal, and he's doing a lot of speaking in front of this heart tree. Starting to think Daemon's getting real in touch with these old gods here, which we obviously see later on in the episode, but sure, we'll talk about that when we get to it. But it's interesting because, you know, these should really have no significance to him, and Daemon has really not ever been one to care about stuff like this, but lo and behold, here we are. They're having this private conversation out there, and Sir Alfred Broome's talking about how the fact that Daemon's amassed an army and Rhaenyra has faltered. They said, like, obviously he's never going to serve the Higher Tower forces, he'll never turn to Team Green, but that he believes that the realm and that their side, you know, as much as Rhaenyra's intentions are pure and good, that he believes that their side need a king to rally behind, and that this king could be Daemon. And obviously we've seen everything that he's been doing in Harrenhal so far leading up to this, and all the suggestions that, you know, here's the crown, you've always wanted it, and him going around saying to Simon Strong. And I think this, because Simon Strong is also watching, right? He's watching from a concealed location this conversation and is supposedly able to hear what they're saying, and so eventually sends a letter to Rhaenyra that he is concerned that Daemon may be deciding to petition himself as a candidate for kingship over her. And I think this is very legitimate as a concern from Simon Strong, because obviously he's been living with Daemon this past while, and Daemon has been getting increasingly more erratic and more demanding that everyone call him king and not king consort. And he's obviously been showing very disturbing and frantic behaviour. As much as I kind of consider that Simon Strong may have some sort of collaboration with Alys, and may also be a wee bit aware of the visions and things, because he loves Harrenhal, like, surely he knows the crack. And so I think it's a situation where he kind of knows what Daemon's going through, but at the same time he's like, I have every reason to doubt his commitment and his fealty to the Queen, and so perhaps I should contact her and just give her a heads up that not only is he acting completely erratic and like he wants to be king, but one of your councillors has also just showed up and kind of reinforced this. And so you might want to get yourself over here and challenge him a little bit, maybe get him back in line. I also think in this scene it was really funny the way, like, the weirwoods started whispering in the wind, and Alfred Broome's like, "What is that? Did you hear something?" And Daemon's like, "This place will have you barking at the moon." Like, what a quote, and so true. Daemon has just been loopy-loo this past season, and at least he's calling it out and recognising it. At least he's demonstrating a bit of self-awareness, a bit of self-reflection. Then, immediately following this, we have a scene with Aemond and Ironrod, and they're back in the Red Keep, and he's walking around, and Ironrod's kind of informing him the dragon seeds for the tryouts escaped through these boats that were basically up on shore, and that's how they got over to Dragonstone from King's Landing, is they got loaded up on these ships and sent over. And so Aemond is like, yep, all the boats are getting stopped and searched, everything's getting restricted, I don't care. And he's like, okay, but you also recognise that, you know, that's how we need to bring in any small amount of food that we do get past the blockade, and, you know, it's essential for the fishers to go out and do their fishing in these boats, or, you know, the people won't have any of that to consume. And so Aemond's just kind of like, I do not care. It is disadvantageous for us, security-wise, to allow these boats just to come and go. And realistically, these people will not need any food if they're dead. So it is in their best interest to heed to my demands, and that is that, what I say will go. And my god, this man, like, obviously in the last scene we got a shot that very much illustrates that he does not care one bit about the small folk. He just went and burned thousands of them, and so now he's very, very willing to starve thousands of them too in the town, even faster than they are already starving. So I really feel like it's only a matter of time before it really kicks off. We can see in the last scene that Aemond is walking around within that like little upstairs balcony area of the courtyard in the Red Keep, and we see that Alicent and Helaena are speaking in one of the rooms, and Helena's like, why do they hate us? Like, we didn't impose the blockade. And it seems like she kind of misunderstands politics and the intention and hurt of the small folk, the experience of the small folk, despite the fact she seemed quite perceptive to it earlier on in the season. So it's hard to say how far her understanding of others goes. But obviously, again, she's supposed to be a neurodiverse character, and so understanding some of these things might be a bit more complex for her, where, you know, people's intentions don't seem like they're so clearly laid out, or people's experience aren't being fully communicated. And so within this scene then, we get Alicent turn to her and say, here, drink this, and gives her some sort of tea, some sort of hot drink that has been prepared. I want to know what this is. Is this supposed to be some sort of moon tea? And if so, who would she be pregnant to? And I mean, it might very well be nothing, but it just seems like, why would they put this on here if it's not a reference to something? And so I just don't know. Like, it seems like they're being very purposeful with every action that happens and every word that's said, and that they're cutting a whole lot of things to make way for other things. So surely they wouldn't just throw this in for no reason. It wouldn't just be a randomly inserted scene. And so I have to wonder what this is. But she then suggests them leaving and running away together, and Helena's talking about how, you know, she doesn't really understand how this would work, but then she also remarked she was happier before she was queen, and the irony of saying this to Alicent, who literally found nothing but suffering in the toil and service that she underwent for her house, for the realm, for her marriage, for her children, whatever. She lost every bit of agency in her whole life. She lost every avenue to her own pleasure, her own desire, achieving her own dreams, even realising what they were, because she never really had the opportunity to. And so Helaena saying this to her is really just like the biggest sign of preaching to the choir you've literally ever seen. But the pair are having this conversation, and then Aemond walks into the room. He just immediately is like saying to Helaena, I need you to fly out and Dreamfire to battle. And Alicent is like, Aemond, would you please, like, be so for real, like, give over, it's not gonna happen. And then Helaena is like, I don't want to burn people, you know, like, she's a sweet innocent angel, like, and she doesn't want to cause hurt to anybody, especially not innocents who, you know, obviously don't deserve it. So it doesn't make any sense to her why she should do this. And he goes over and grabs her arm and is like, it doesn't really matter that you don't understand why you have to do this. The fact of the matter is that you have to do this for the honour of our house. He talks about how they defiled their birthright and made commoners dragon riders, and basically that this is an abomination upon House Targaryen and their heritage. And she's once in pain. Alicent tries to get in between them to break them up and tries to get his hand off her arm. And Alicent, you know, turns around and we get this scene that we got in the trailer where she is saying, you want to be king, but you reign over ruin and death of the small folk, basically in your rage. So you cannot contain yourself, you cannot be trusted, and you have so little self-restraint that you can't contain yourself from hurting those you see as lower than you if you think there'll be no consequence. And we've also obviously seen, because she does know 100% that he did what he did to Aegon, that he has no issue with causing harm to those above him too, especially when it's beneficial to him. He is getting really agitated, and you can actually hear the emotion in his voice, possibly for the first time all season. And he is talking about, would you not have us won, like, by any means necessary? And she's like, no, not like this. Just before this, when he still has Helaena in his hand, or his hand around Helena's wrist, Alicent says, you forget yourself, she is still your queen. And he's like, what, like you once were? And now look at the situation we're in. And it's like he's just trying to pun this constantly. It's always like he's trying to pun something on Alicent, and he wants to accept no responsibility in this, despite the fact that he was involved in the usurping of the throne, the fact that he was the one who spilled first blood and was also first to kinsley in the war. And then he went out, killed Millie's and Rhaenys, and it has done nothing but absolutely escalate the situation since, and especially with the fact he just went out to Sharp Point and burned the whole city to the ground just because he was annoyed, and he literally burned the first city that he came to. And so it's just very, very clear that he's a very silly boy, and he doesn't seem to think so, which makes him even more dangerous. But yeah, he's just trying to pin the blame on everyone but himself, despite the fact that he is almost single-handedly pushing this entire war forwards. Alicent then goes to Orwell and suggests that she needs safe and discreet passage to somewhere. Who's to know where? We'll find out later in the episode. So we then get this scene with Cole and Gwen that we seen in the trailer that had me gasping, because I was like, this is going to be so juicy. Wasn't exactly as juicy as I thought it was going to be. Honestly, it was more tragic than anything. Like, this man is so pitiful. I feel bad for Criston Cole. I didn't think it was possible, but they've made me feel bad for this man. So the scene starts off and Cole is sitting on this log, armor off. He's just got like the underpadding on, and he's sitting on his own away from his men. His men are all setting up a camp. They're all busy working away, and he's sitting looking at this handkerchief that he got from Alicent that, as far as I can remember, it had an A embroidered on it. Like, baby, you could have left that out. Like, we understand it's Alicent's favour. Like, you don't need to sit and literally put her initials on it, but sure. And so he's sitting and he like holds it to his lips and like presses his lips on it, and it actually seems like he has love for Alicent, and it hasn't really felt like that all season, because obviously we've just been seeing the lost side of the relationship, despite the fact that we did have this kind of building towards a more, emotional connection in season 1, where, like he said in the scene, she did save him twice, one from the executioner and one from his own hand. So we did get to set up for more of an emotional connection and a loving relationship between the pair, but then all season, because Alicent is reckoning with her grief, it comes out more of a manifestation of exploring sexuality with each other, and exploring this carnal desire that you obviously never got to explore. So it distracted in a way from the fact that they do have an emotional connection and bond, and here he talks about this. So he is obviously sitting kissing his handkerchief, and Gwen comes over and is like, have you no shame, Cole? King's guards sleeping with a queen. And he turns around and he's like, former queen. And at that point, if I was Gwen, I would have just hacked away at him, because the disrespect. Then he goes on to have this whole mushy, like, emotional sentiment about the queen. It's almost like he's got these emotions that he hasn't quite worked through himself about Alicent, and that they obviously haven't really had a whole lot of time to actually discuss amongst themselves, because their secret affair has been confined to the wee hours of the morning. Gwen is talking about, I could get you sent to the wall. And Cole is like, yeah, and what would the point in that be? Because all it would do would be, I would go to the wall and it would bring dishonour upon your house. So what's the point in that? And this is the start of this whole descent into nihilism in this whole scene. He's talking about how Alicent, like I said, saved his life twice, once from the executioner and then one from his own hand. He says that since then, she is the beacon that he follows. Now, so poetic, so beautiful, so lovely. Did not expect these beautiful, poetic, lovely words to be coming from Criston Cole about Alicent Hightower, but here we go. And then he talks about how women bring him grief after grief, like he wishes that he couldn't feel the way he does, but he does. So, I don't know. It was quite sweet. It was endearing, but at the same time, stop being such a sap boy and giving off about like, oh, women bring me nothing but heartache. You have been so on some uncel behaviour in the past season and a half. towards Rhaenyra just because she rejected running away with you to Essos. But sure, you're the one that's being hard done by the situation. You've literally actively gone out of your way to raise a war against this woman. But sure. And also facilitate the crowning of the usurper, and then leading an army against her just because she rejected you. But sure. Again, always a victim, Cole. Yeah, my empathy only lasts so long with this man. Anyways, and he starts talking about how, you know, there are only some honourable men, and then he says, or perhaps all men are corrupt, and honour is a mist that dispenses in the morning. So, very bleak philosophy. As Gwen Hightower said, and we get that bit of dialogue that we got in the trailer about how dragons dance and men are dust under their feet. And then he suggests that dying would be a kinder relief. And Gwen just sits down beside him on the log and is defeated by this conversation with Cole. All the life is sucked from this man. Cole is like a psychic vampire, taking the literal life and energy from this man with his depressing attitude and his nihilistic views. And the worst part about it is it's kind of justified. We seen what happened to Rook's Rest. How could you not be forever changed after that? But yeah, I wanted a wee bit more violence from the scene. Whenever I seen it in the trailer, I was really like, oh, we're gonna get Gwen, like he's gonna be threatening to hack this man's head off, he's gonna be like really shouting him down, he's gonna be defending his sister. And it was kind of lackluster. It was more of a scene just about Cole being nihilistic rather than a scene of Gwen being defiant and reclaiming some sort of agency within this whole war planning thing. But still love him. Still Gwen defense attorney. But sure. We'll see where this goes. Then we get this mod wrestling scene, and it's so silly goofy, but it's like, we needed this after the last episode as a pick-me-up, like we really did. And it's Tyland who is fighting Admiral Lohar, and we get to see all these really interesting shots of the onlookers. Like the mod wrestle itself is very comedic. It's like a comedic insert in the middle of these really complex, like, sad boy scenes. So it's basically sandwiched between a scene of Cole moping and Gwen kind of sitting like, oh my god, and then a scene of Jace who's sitting moping and Baela trying to like save the situation essentially. And then they just have this scene in the middle of these two characters and Essos just completely rolling around in the mud, Tyland getting caked, royally caked in mud, and getting thrown around in this pit and just looking absolutely pathetic and helpless. And then Shirako just having a good laugh, having a good time. Clearly this wacky, zany, eccentric character is making quite the impression, and Tyland is for some reason making an impression on Lohar. And so all these onlookers are there as well, and a whole load of them have the Triarchy dyed beards and hair. And so we get all these blue hair individuals, which is so fun. And you know, we were talking in the trailer breakdown about how they've seemingly combined the character of Admiral Lohar and Ricalio Rundun, and kind of taken aspects of, you know, their story and their character and put them together in this one character that Abigail Thorne is playing. And as much as I still believe that, I was reminded in a couple of like videos that I was watching that we did actually hear about Ricalio Rundun in season 1 from Rhaenyra. And Rhaenyra was, you know, talking about the fact, oh, you know, there's this like commander in the Triarchy who goes around and dyes his beard and he's very eccentric and whatever, and dresses as a woman and whatever. It's unclear because obviously this could have been applied to Admiral Lohar, but Lohar doesn't dye their hair, and so very interesting. But obviously there are other people within the fleet who do, and so it's strange. I don't really know what to make of it, but it's just an interesting observation, and I am very interested in this character. I think they're very fun, and I quite like Abigail Thorne too in the role, and so it'll be interesting to see where they go. But eventually, by the end of the scene, because Tyland Lannister's getting absolutely smoked this whole time, he's rolling around face full of mud, and Shirako's just completely besting him, and then eventually he gets over himself and starts throwing hands and gets Admiral Lohar in the mud, and then Lohar is like, you've impressed me, and they decide to go after dinner. And just before this, Lohar turns around and is like, so how do you have you ever eaten the flesh of your enemies? And Lannister's freaking the boat, was like, what? Absolutely not, and I don't want to either. And turns out it's just a fun cannibalism joke. And Lohar's like, come on, I know you think we're big scary pirates, but come on, it's just a joke. Lighten up. Come on, Titan, lighten up. And, they have this really, really good rapport, which is bordering on flirtatious, which only escalates in the dinner scene. Like I said, then we have a scene with Jace and Baela. And I've been really, really liking their scenes so far. Just before the season started, I was watching a video by David Lightbringer, and we'll get on to it later on in the episode, but this episode had some real things that were just simply put in there for David Lightbringer specifically. But before the season started, I watched a video that he'd put out on Jace and Baela and how they were essentially going to be like some real like important characters in upcoming season 2, and that they were definitely going to have some really strong scenes together. And as much as they were kind of underutilized, but essentially that it was 8 episodes cut down to 10, and so they kind of had to limit what they were actually including, and it was difficult because at the time that this was happening, they've also said that this was a decision by HBO, and that the writing staff, the showrunner, did not want this cut down of the episodes, but that this also happened in the midst of the writer's strike, and so they couldn't really have much in the ways of rewrites. So they essentially had to stick with what they had, which is why I feel like this kind of feels like a penultimate episode. Like it's leading up to like, okay, we'll give you a really big impactful final that'll bring you back next year or in 2 years time. But with the Rhaena or with the Baela and Jace stuff, I think they did a really good job. And despite the fact that we don't actually see them have much in the ways of physical interaction or romantic interaction, it is clear that they are already like very much forming a strong emotional bond and support system with each other. Like in this scene, Baela comes in and Jace is sitting, he's reading through scrolls and books, and he's sitting pouting and feeling sorry for himself, and is just seething with rage at the fact that these illegitimate dragon riders are now lording around his castle, and there's not very much he can do about it. And Baela comes in and says what all of us are thinking, because obviously every single one of us has been commenting on the fact that this man is getting paid a full check to sit around all season and pout. And Baela comes in and she's like, it does not befit a prince to pout. And she's so right. And she's so right. Good for her for calling this man out. And he's like, I'm not pouting, I'm reading. Like, okay, Jace, I mean, you can do both at the same time. Like, we do believe in your capacity to multitask. Anyways, she's like, okay, so you're sitting reading while your mother waits, which would suggest to me that this is like immediately before the dragon seed dining scene, and that she is waiting for her son to come so that she can start the feast, and he is in another room pouting, sulking, and refusing to turn up for the family meal, essentially, which is quite funny. He's really just throwing this whole stroppy teenager thing. And so then he is kind of talking about the whole dragon seed situation, and like, are you not annoyed about this? Like, they're common, what does that make us? And she's like, it doesn't make me common. Like, I'm still Baela Targaryen. I'm still every bit of a Targaryen princess as I was before they claimed these dragons, and it does not threaten my position. And obviously she's in a very different position than Jace, which we do need to recognise, but at the same time he did need her coming in and giving this speech to pull him out of the depression that he was in, or else he never would have been sitting with the dragon seeds at that meal. He never would have given them the opportunity, the time of day, to make any sort of a good impression on him. It's only because of the words of Baela and her capacity for reassuring him. Again, in this whole theme of reassuring him, he turns around and is like, you know what I am? And she's like, I do not care. Which is big for her to say, because realistically this could threaten the legitimacy of their children if they were to have children, and could make her life a lot more complicated than it needed to be, and could lead to uprisings against him because of his contestation and his parentage. And still she stands by his side and is like, I do not care what you are if you're illegitimate. And we're really getting this severe acknowledgement in the last 2 episodes that he fully acknowledges that Harmon Strong's his father. And obviously we got earlier in the season Baela talking about Harmon Strong being his father, but really again in this reinforcing the fact that it is commonly known, but she is completely and entirely accepting of this, and it doesn't affect how she sees him, much the way that these new dragon riders being there doesn't affect how she sees herself. She then turns around and is like, do you think you're the only noble who was not sired by his noble father? Which I think is really interesting, because then it opens up ideas like, who else do we think that she could be referring to, like historically and at this time? Like, what do you know, Baela? Let us in the secrets. And so she then suggests that he can prove all of these people who have doubted his parentage and his legitimacy as heir, that he can prove them wrong by going and sitting at the side of his mother and essentially being her counsel, being, actively working alongside her and working in pursuit of his future role as heir to the throne and the Seven Kingdoms. Then again, we're back with the Triarchy and Tylan and Lohar just, developing this weird, flirtatious military alliance they've been establishing over the past couple of scenes together. And it opens with this really weird scene of Tylan being made to sing in front of all these men, and Shirako's obviously just putting him up to all these things for entertainment, and clearly entertaining, but this man is literally like a fish out of water. Like, they did a really good job of contrasting the culture of Westeros, which is very like stiff upper lip, like, all about this like reticence and reservedness and, the need to be official, compared to the Triarchy, where everyone's just having fun and getting things done. And so it's a real like culture shock to Tylan, but he is participating in all this because obviously he needs the military alliance, but also he's kind of letting his hair down. And we see that Lohar is impressed by his efforts going up and singing for entertainment for the people, and says that they are pleased to sail at his command, and then gets up, raises their glass, and says, "To the gullet on the morrow, and let the sea snake rue the day we meet again." Because obviously there was conflict with the Triarchy in the Stepstones with the sea snake and his fleet, and so it's going to be interesting to see what happens when they go to the gullet on the morrow. At the end of this interaction, Lohar turns around to Tylan, and again, gender very ambiguous, and I think this entire time Tylan's also questioning it, because it is very, very ambiguous. And after this whole weird flirtatious back and forth that they've been having this whole time, he's then prepositioned by Lohar, who says that they wish to have children by him, and Tylan is like, okay, what do you mean? Like, some further notes, please. Doesn't shut it down, notably, but it's kind of like, what's going on here? What are you asking of me? And I think the implication is being made that Tylan is thinking they want to be impregnated by him themselves. Lohar then turns around and suggests that they would like Tylan to sleep with all of their wives, to which Tylan responds, "How many wives do you have?" These two really offered a whole lot of comedic relief in an otherwise quite serious episode. Then we get the scene on Dragonstone, and it's obviously between Rhaenyra, Jace, Baela, and the three new dragon riders, Adam, Hugh, and Ulf. Ulf is continuing to be very obnoxious. He's being very derogatory and almost suggestive to one of the serving women, and he's demanding more food. He's just eating with his hands, and it clearly has no formal table manner or any manner at all. Rhaenyra offers a toast to all of them and talks about how this is an honour that very few have known, and a power that very few have known, and essentially is stressing the fact that it needs to be used with caution and with respect to these beasts. She says, "If you serve me, I will make you knights." And so obviously being added to the gentry of Westeros will be quite the feat for these lowborn men, who are toiling in service to others their whole life and have suffered greatly for it. And so this is a big offer that she's making, and it would greatly benefit them. It would improve their quality of life. And we see the three responses, and this says a lot about each of their character. So Adam immediately says, "I will not fail you." And we've already seen that he is very much committed to Rhaenyra, committed to the cause, despite the fact that he's really just been drafted in, very, very recently. He is one of the more loyal of her servants, and she seems to trust him quite a bit, given the fact that she then asks him to fly out to Harrenhal at the end of the scene. But obviously they fostered a very good relationship, and she is appreciative of, his desire to serve her and his acknowledgement of, his history, his parentage, and also the fact that he believes in her and recognizes that, his purpose as a dragon seed is to help her in the war effort. And so we see that he wishes to serve, that he is, quite eager to get this knighthood, but also quite eager to continue in servitude to the queen. And then we have Hugh, who says, "What must we do?" And so he's less eager to just immediately throw down everything and say that he'll run off and serve her, but he also does not be antagonistic or does not be opposing to the idea. He simply asks, "What must we do?" And Rhaenyra is talking about how, after a conversation with Corlys, she realizes that they must strike while they have the advantage, and that her initial plan for deterrence is not enough. They need to engage in combat. In the same vein as Helaena earlier on in the episode states that she does not want to kill small folk, Baela interjects and says, "You wish for us to kill innocents?" And again, it kind of comes down to this idea of collateral damage and the cost of war, and the fact that, Rhaenyra really, she sacrificed scores of small folk in the last episode, and in the last 2 episodes have also utilised the small folk to their maximum advantage to her. She got the small folk to claim dragons to assist in her war effort, and before that she used the small folk to incite a riot in King's Landing and sow discord. And she has continuously, and specifically at the behest of the advice of Miss Arya, she has made these decisions that impact the small folk and that cause the small folk to react in a certain way, but in a way that is beneficial to her. Especially after the desensitization of violence towards small folk that she exhibited in the last episode, that she is seeing this as a necessity. She's like, "Oh, well, I don't really want to go out and do this," but at the same time, like, what other choice do we have? Like, deterrence is not enough. Like, we're gonna have to act. Jace supports her and says it is hard, but it is necessary, and this is one of the very few times that we see him speaking up on behalf of his mother, especially in a group setting. And so it shows that he's kind of taken on Baela's advice to stand by his mother's side and to support her. And then, of course, we have Ulf and his really ignorant response to this. And when I say I literally need, like, animal services, like dragon RSPCA, to go out and rescue this dragon from this man, because then he turns around and he starts talking, like, on behalf of he and the dragon, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Silverwing's a goer. Yeah, we fear nothing." And it's like, you have ridden this dragon like once. It was a dodgy joyride. You have no care for this animal. You have no psychic connection. You don't know what she's feeling. You're just some guy. You're literally just some guy. Like, stop for the love of God. And yeah, no, he's just so, like, he's so cocky and ambitious and full of all the hubris of the day, and it's infuriating to watch. Especially because Silverwing's such a beautiful, lovely girl and she deserves better. But sure, she's stuck with this nuisance of a man now, this imbecile. Anyway, it's then at the end of this scene we get the Maester coming in and delivering a message from Simon Strong at Harrenhal, and suggests that Daemon may have risen this army for his own benefit and not for Rhaenyra's. So Rhaenyra turns around and she calls Adam to join her on a trip to Harrenhal, despite Jace also sitting at the table and looking at her like he has just faced the biggest betrayal of his life, after him trying to support her and support her ideas. And then she doesn't even consider him. She just immediately turns around and takes Adam. And it's strange because Adam's been here for a very short amount of time, and she is entrusting him with this journey, and with a lot of collaboration with her. And obviously whenever she came back, she favoured being in his company than with her council, and then chooses him over her own son to go to Harrenhal and to be at these political manoeuvrings, even though we didn't see him at Harrenhal. like he is there, he's still on site, you know. And so it's very interesting. It kind of made me think, does she have an eye for Adam? Is there something going on there? Does she, I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at it in a really creepy weird way, but I wouldn't put it past the Targaryens, you know. Maybe she has a thing for Adam, but she definitely seems to trust him a hell of a lot more than she trusts other dragon seeds, I can say that much. So then we get one of the most significant and probably most contested parts of the whole episode. And this is back in Harrenhal. Daemon wakes in his weirwood bed to see Alys sitting on the bed. Supposedly she's crying. I didn't catch that in my viewing of the episode, and I viewed it twice, but supposedly she's crying in this scene. And he's like, "Do you never sleep, witch?" To which she responds, "I'm going to the Godswood." And for some reason he feels the need to escort her to the Godswood. Despite everything that has happened to him while he's been at Harrenhal, he still lacks the better judgment than to just literally close his eyes and go back to sleep. He instead follows her out. And she starts to say, "When you came here you were a closed fist, but you've discovered, I think, that this world will not be governed." And obviously we've seen that in his visions. His ambition and his self-interest has really faded greatly since he first arrived, and then he had all of these visions that well and truly humbled him and made him confront, you know, the things that he's done to others and how those have impacted him and his treatment of others in the past, and how this has influenced his treatment of others currently and the ambition that he holds for himself. And so to an extent, yes, absolutely true. Or then she says, "Do you wish to learn what is given to you? All your life you sought to command your own fate, but today you are ready." And whenever they're going down to the weirwood and she's saying all this, you know, we're going down to the heart tree in the Godswood in Harrenhal. And when I said earlier about there are multiple scenes in this that I really just thought to myself, this is for David Lightbringer. Like, Ryan Condal put in the whole Tywin Lannister horse joke for Glytis. These scenes with this Cernunos green man figure, that is for David Lightbringer. The scene with the red comet, the moon meteor scenes, that whole imagery, that was for David Lightbringer. That's going to be up, or that's going to be in this vision that we talk about now. But we see this green man figure who's beside the weirwood, just kind of creep around the tree and disappear. This antlered green man, and the green men are figures that exist on the Isle of Faces over the Godseye Lake that you can literally see from the Godswood of Harrenhal. And it's really interesting because no one is really able to go out there, and those that have don't really seem to say very much about it. It's a very interesting way to start the scene. It is definitely a precursor for a very bizarre, strange, and potentially lore impactful vision that he then has when she offers up the fact that, you know, you have the chance to view your own fate. And so he puts his hand on the weirwood tree, and when he does, it is gushing with red blood-like weirwood paste, and he puts his hand just over the face that is carved into the tree, which is literally the face of George R.R. Martin, as you can see in the behind the episode. And then, as he puts his hand on the face of George R.R. Martin and is being drenched in weirwood paste and sap, we then descend into this really chaotic visual sequence in this dreamlike state in the Harrenhal Godswood, touching the heart tree, which has literal George R.R. Martin's face on it. And he then starts to see the future in this weird trippy green sight sequence, in which it starts off with a shot of bloodraven, the three-eyed crow, the three-eyed raven, Brendan Rivers, this figure who is going to appear in the Duncan Egg show, which is upcoming next year, but is the three-eyed raven that we've seen in Game of Thrones, who was, you know, encapsulated in all the roots and was kind of instructing Bran. We see a young version of the three-eyed raven. Very interesting shot. I don't think a lot of people was expecting to see this. I was very excited about it. I really liked that they included the birthmark, which supposedly looks like a raven, and then the three-eyed leap from that and transition into a different kind of shot where you're kind of switching from the perspective of the three-eyed raven into the perspective of a dire wolf, and then you see the army of the others. And it's very interesting because you go from seeing bloodraven to the white walkers, and then we get this shot of a dead dragon with dead soldiers, and supposedly this dragon is Caraxes. Now I thought a lot of the CGI in this was very interesting. So the initial shot, obviously, of bloodraven was using the actor. I thought it was a very crisp shot, was really interestingly done cinematically, and you know, the framing of it I really liked. And then as soon as it jumped into the three-eyed raven animation, I didn't think it was very convincing. I thought it was quite cartoonish. I don't know if maybe that's just my perspective. Maybe I need to watch it back when it's not 3 o'clock in the morning, but I wasn't really sure about that. Then the White Walker CGI in the behind the episode, their prosthetics look great, and all the CG work that they were seemingly doing looked great, but then for some reason in the episode it looked really, really blurry, like a bad filter. I don't know what that was about, but for some reason there was a creative decision made along the way that I just don't really know if it worked as good as it might have if they'd just simply shot instead of making it look slightly dreamlike in this way, in a way that they haven't for all the other dream sequences in Harrenhal. Thought it was a bit interesting, but then when we get this dead dragon, it seemed like a lot better CGI, but it was also so quick, and you know, there was so much other commotion going on with all the other sounds and sights and dead soldiers that I wasn't really paying attention to what dragon it was, because I thought it might have been in reference to Daenerys' dragons because it was clearly looking to the future, or that it might have just been symbolic of the death of all dragons in that period of time between the Dance of the Dragons and between, you know, the scenes that we see in Game of Thrones. So I wasn't entirely sure who this was supposed to be, but then supposedly, and having watched just a couple of other videos between now and when I watched the actual episode, people were saying they think it's Caraxes. And obviously we go from this scene of Caraxes supposedly lying dead into Daemon falling into this puddle of blood and then pool of water, and him kind of sinking into the depths and us not really knowing what happens. And then it cuts to the Red Comet, which obviously exists in Game of Thrones. We've seen this before, but as soon as I seen it, I was like, this is for David Lightbringer. Like, this for him. He got a shot. And straight after this, we almost see it transition like a collision into a shot of the dragon eggs, and then the dragon, like the petrified dragon eggs of Daenerys in the fire. And then we get a shot of Daenerys and the 3 dragons hatched. The entire scene ends with a shot of him looking at Rhaenyra on the throne, as if to say, this is the future. You know, the threat of the White Walkers in the north, them coming down, the fall of dragons, the conflict that you're currently experiencing, and how this threat will persist, where yous will perish, and that essentially the prince that is promised is in the future, and is, you know, potentially all these like images of blood in the water and whatever might symbolize that this is from your future bloodline, you know, that yous are relevant because it is your future bloodline that will bring an end to this through the hatching of these 3 dragons after a time when yourself and the other dragons are long gone. And a very brave decision, especially for the last episode, bringing back the White Walkers and also the shot of Daenerys. Very interesting. I actually think it kind of worked just because they didn't fixate on it too much. And also when people were talking about it in the leaks, because I did see a bit of this in the leaks, people were talking about like, oh, he's like only now swearing fealty to Rhaenyra because of this vision. I didn't get that at all. I still got that it was completely his choice, his agency. He'd already made his decision when he's talking to Alfred Broom, and he's like, I didn't picture you as a turncloak. Like, there is very much that energy of, no, I'm here for Rhaenyra, I'm raising an army in her name. And especially after the conversation with Viserys in the last episode, I really didn't get the feeling that this was only happening because of some sort of vision that he had that had Daenerys and the White Walkers. I didn't get that at all. But no, I thought it was interesting, and I thought they'd done it in a way that I was intrigued by it. I actually quite liked the scene. So yeah, I'm supportive of it. And I also think it's interesting the way they brought in the dragon eggs, because we obviously seen the shots in season 1 where Daemon, and the implication was made that these dragon eggs that he found in the clutch in season 1 were then the dragon eggs that were transferred with Rhaena and the boys to go to Pentos. You know, it was Varys' egg and then the 3 other eggs, the red, the green and the gold, that were supposedly supposed to be modelled after Daenerys' eggs to give the impression that these are Daenerys' eggs. And that was confirmed in one of the behind the scenes, but then Ryan Condal kind of retconned it. And said, oh, you know, they might be, but they also might not be, because obviously the fandom has thought it was Dreamfire's eggs and not Syrax's. If that is the case, it's interesting that they're presenting the visual of these eggs that are petrified in the fire and then hatching into the 3 dragons to Daenerys, who is the prince that is promised, and that this has a direct connection to Daemon, not only through bloodline but also through his action of going and collecting these eggs from Syrax's clutch in the Dragonmont and having them incubated and having them transported to Pentos. So it's very interesting looking at it that way. But then at the end of the vision, Helaena shows up. So he turns around from Rhaenyra on the throne, and Helaena, who I am not sure if they've even shared 5 seconds of screen time together the entirety of this series. I don't even know if he knows her name. But she shows up and says, it's all a story, you're but one part in it, you know your part, you know what you must do. And so then it cuts to a scene of her on the balcony, almost while she's mid-speech to Daemon, as if she is communicating with him in real time while he's having this vision, and she is somehow in tune with the weirwood net through her dragon dreams and is able to communicate with him, or has had some sort of collaboration with Alice Rivers to deliver these visions to him in a way that she can communicate with him. But I also think it's very possible that this is part of Daemon's vision because he is wrong to Helaena, and that it's not her literally communicating to him in real time, that it's more a reflection of his guilt and the fact that he had her son beheaded and her traumatized because he was acting impulsively and was incapable of delivering direct orders, which he now has obviously had to learn this lesson through the beheading of William Blackwood. And so she is yet another woman that he has wronged, and that he has to reckon with his guilt and his responsibility in that situation. And so it could be possible that she is not literally connected to this weirwood vision, and that it is more of another one of his like visual apparitions to deal with his own guilt and grief. But I don't know, it's very strange. I have a lot of theories around that, and so I might make a separate video maybe later in the week or maybe next week looking at, you know, this whole idea of the dragon dreams enmeshing with the weirwood net, because previously they had been seen as quite distinct from each other, but obviously we are seeing that they meld together in this one scene. So we then get the scene of Aemond and Helaena on the balcony. First and foremost, I want to get it out of the way. I still think there's this weird underlying sexual tension and that he kind of fancies her. I still get that vibe, and the actor and the actress have even said in the behind the scenes and in interviews and stuff that they have kind of played up to that. And so the shippers, they win again, but also at the same time I'm literally going to jump this man, like literally get away from Helaena, get so far away from her. I'm so sick and tired. Why are you still here? Go fly off in your dragon and burn a city. Leave this woman alone. Anyway, Helaena is a sweet angelic princess, and like Alison said in that earlier scene, she is an innocent. She is the only one of them all who is deserving of peace, and this man is trying to disrupt her peace once again. Like we said in the trailer breakdown video, Blood and Cheese would not have happened if he did not kill Jace. She would not have got caught up in the riots in King's Landing if he had not closed the gates. She has suffered so much because of his decisions, and now he's trying to strong arm her into going out and flying into battle in Dreamfire when she is clearly not battle tested and not capable, and definitely does not want to go and does not want to participate in this war. She doesn't even understand why it's happening. She doesn't understand why people don't like them, and she's just a sweet innocent angel princess dragonfly, and we need to protect her at all costs. And also Dreamfire literally needs to sit and chill out. She's an older lady and she needs to be in retirement. She doesn't need to listen to this weird man sitting going on to them on and on and on. Oh, I need you to fly out to battle. It's not my fight. It's genuinely not my fight. So anyway, rant over. So he comes out, and it's very interesting because he approaches her in a very different way now that they're on their own. So whenever he went into the room and you know, one of the King's Guard was there and Alicent was there, he wanted to maintain this image of being powerful and unfeeling. And so he comes in, all guns blazing, and is dictating to her and is, you know, communicating only through ways of him depicting his wrath and his desire for revenge and his need for violence. And then whenever he's talking to her on the balcony and it's just them, he exposes this sort of vulnerability and he's almost crying the way through the scene, and he's appealing to the emotional side of things and to the family connection side of things. And instead of being like, I need you to find Dreamfire into battle and we have no choice and they've done X, Y and Z, instead he appeals to the fact that, you know, they share a commonality, they share blood, they're dragon riders. He talks about how he understands that she wishes to share no blood, but that unfortunately it's a necessity. And he asks her to come to Harrenhal, and she turns around, and despite the fact he is trying to appeal to her emotion this time, and takes a completely different approach, almost reminiscent to when he was talking to Sylvie in the brothel. You know, he seems to drop this steely persona and tries to, you know, display himself as this young and vulnerable man that he once was. And Helaena turns around and says, and what if I refuse? Will you burn me as you done Aegon? I saw it. And then you see that the look in his eye where he wanted to appeal to her sensitivity to his vulnerability switches from, you know, trying to depict that emotion, and it changes from this to this look of fear. And all of a sudden this man, who is known to be fierce, is known to strike fear in the heart of enemy and ally alike. He turns around and he is terrified at the fact that she would even suggest such a thing. He talks about how it's treason and that it's a lie, and he denies it, unlike in the situation with Lucerys, which was actually a lie and that it was a mistake, but he never once claimed that. Whereas in the situation with Aegon, where it was fully on purpose, he is now denying it to his sister. So then he suggests this is treason, and she says that she's seen it, and that he burned Aegon and let him fall, and that she's seen all this. And now obviously after hearing this, he knows that she's a dragon dreamer, because there's no way that she would have seen it otherwise, because obviously she wasn't there. So he knows, but obviously in this situation he is too panicked by this supposed and alleged treason and these remarks that are being made against him, that he tried to quell from Aegon, because he thought Aegon was the only person that would ever expose him. And in the off chance that any of the army men tried to expose him, he sent them immediately off to Harrenhal, so that no one there could speak of what he did. Helaena, who has been in the Red Keep this whole time and living under his nose, turns around and she's like, I seen it. I seen what you did. And all of a sudden he becomes threatened by this. Now the situation is out of his control, and he can't moderate it, and he also can't bring himself to do anything about it. She says that Aegon will be king again. He has yet to see victory, and he sits on a wooden throne. She says, and when this happens, you will be dead. You'll be lost in the god's eye. And I think this is very interesting. Obviously she's speaking prophecy. This is very reminiscent to the scene where Alys says to Daemon, you will die in this place, when he's at Harrenhal in the Godswood beside the Godseye Lake, right facing straight on to the Isle of Faces, and is, you know, kind of predicting that there's going to be all this conflict at the site of Harrenhal. This is again kind of referring to that, and I think it's interesting with, you know, the phrasing of the Godseye and the Godswood and stuff being constantly referred to, because obviously we are again having all these religious conflicts, and the fact that these dragon riders see themselves as gods, and now they are going to be subject to the scrutiny of the gods in the god's eye. In response to this, Aemond is obviously absolutely horrified, disgusted, terrified, and feeling very much out of control of the situation, and is starting to flounder, as we seen him in the last episode. And so he turns around and he says, I could have you killed for this. And obviously he wouldn't, because he, like I said, I believe he has a little crush on his sister. And she turns around and she's like, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter, your fate would remain the same. And she just walks off. And like her power in this scene, so remarkable. And we even said this in the trailer for the last trailer for this season finale. I was even saying, like, God, I hope she just turns around and says, like, this is how you're gonna die. And then she did. She like drops being like, yeah, you're gonna be dead, you're gonna be lost in the godseye. Like, excuse me, what? Like, the way she just roasts him, like, he comes in, tries to be all intimidating, and then she's fully like, I've seen how you're gonna die and when it'll be, and nothing you can do will change it. Like, Miss Helaena, she did not need to go that hard, but she did, and I'm so proud of her. And the fact she just walks off at the end, she's like, and what are you gonna do? You gonna kill me? And then he's like, I could have you killed for this. And she's like, wouldn't change anything, so okay. And she just walks away, and he's left teary-eyed, speechless. Have you ever seen this man knocked so hard? This like, the sight of him after this conversation is worse than any look he had on his face after being bullied by his brother or his cousins or anyone. And Helena's not even trying to bully him. She just told him the truth, and he's been running for the truth for so long, because anybody that spoke up against him in recent memory has just been sent away from the Green Council, and nobody else has the power to go up against him. But Helaena, the queen that she is, had no fear, where everyone else cowered from this man. She had no fear, and she told him what he needed to hear. So then Rhaenyra arrives at Harrenhal, and she is obviously going, after having received this letter from Simon Strong, speculating that Daemon may or may not have risen an army in his own favour, not hers. And so she arrives, and as she arrives, she sees this massive host surrounding the castle with hundreds of tents. It says in the inside the episode that they were trying to depict that there is about 30,000 soldiers that are now being stationed at Harrenhal, that these are the forces of the Riverlands, that is a very, very sizable army. And she's obviously arriving and seeing that Daemon has amassed this, and if it was amassed in his name rather than hers, that it would be a significant threat to her, despite the fact that she now has 6 dragons, excluding Caraxes. But we get the shot of her flying up anyway. Flying up over the top of the godseye that we had just had the reference to by Helaena in the last scene, that we also potentially just seen Daemon plunge into in his vision. And we fly over the godseye with Irax and with Sea Smoke. And then we see her passing this large and significant Riverlands force. They're all running because they're obviously not expecting a dragon to show up, and obviously they're scared. And we discussed that in the trailer breakdown, and we also discussed some of the heraldry that they have in this scene. I'm going to be going into a bigger video in the coming weeks, going through all of the heraldry of all the houses that we've been intimately introduced to within the season, so keep an eye out for that. I know, rapidly becoming the Westerosi vexillologist, but sure. So then Simon comes out to meet her, and it's like, oh, I didn't expect you to come in person yourself. Simon absolutely styled to the nines, putting the queen herself to shame. So then they come in, and as she enters, all of the men seem to stop what they're doing, but none of them seem to particularly show her any respect. They do not bow for her, they don't kneel to her, nothing. There's no real actual acknowledgement. It's more like they're disarmed by her presence, but they don't really know how they should react to it, because Daemon has not indicated to them how they should react to it. And so then Daemon shows up, and as he's walking through, they all part for him, they all stand upright as he passes, and all show him every sign of respect to their ruler that they've bent the knee to. And so he talks a lot about how they're in service to him, and he says as much to Rhaenyra, that they are sworn to him, and she loudly asks, and who are you sworn to? To which he then starts speaking in High Valyrian. Any time that we have a scene between these two and they're speaking in High Valyrian, it absolutely melts my soul. So good, so good. Dying to go and do that High Valyrian Duolingo course, but could you picture? It'd be dire. People are literally making fun of the way that I said twins in the last episode, so could you literally picture me sitting on here trying to learn High Valyrian and Duolingo with these? Still might do it though, could be fun. He communicates to her the vision that he had, and that there is a threat in the north, that it's coming, winter is coming with darkness and doom. And she's like, you sound like my father. And he says, the realm's only hope is in a leader who can unite it, and your father chose you. And so it's interesting because whenever he's talking about this whole prophecy thing, he is the only living Targaryen who actually got to see this prophecy. In a sense, he has now been put in the shoes of Aegon the Conqueror himself, because he has seen this vision. Rhaenyra knows about it, Alicent knows about it, Jace knows about it. They've all been told about it in stories that have passed down through the houses, through king from heir to heir. But the only person to actually have seen this vision since Aegon the Conqueror himself is Daemon. And it was not delivered to him in a dragon dream, it was delivered to him in a weirwood vision from the old gods. What interesting connections. How curious. And so it puts him at the status where he almost transcends the position of king now. Because king passes this on, heir to heir, through oral tradition. He has seen it himself in a vision. And so he is put at the same level as Aegon the Conqueror himself. And it's interesting because he has officially reached this status where he is, like, he literally can be compared to the Conqueror. And all of a sudden, he adopts complete subservience to the Black Queen, to his wife, and commits his forces to her. Because he sees in the vision that he must. And he learned through all of his earlier visions of, you know, having to reflect on the hurt that he caused her and having to reckon with his guilt about that, and then looking at the relationship with his brother and the fact that his brother declared her as his true heir, as his chosen heir, that he wishes to respect that. And so it kind of complicates the relationship, but it also provides him with this clarity on their relationship that he didn't previously have. And so it kind of aids him in his decision making, in that he wants to make it very clear to her as well that he swears fealty to her. And it's interesting then that Rhaenyra starts to talk about the fact that he sounds like her father in this whenever he's talking about the vision and the prophecy and dreams. And, you know, she obviously realised at the end of season 1 that he wasn't actually told the prophecy by Viserys, so he wasn't really intended to ever be the heir to Viserys. But whenever she says that, you know, you sound like my father talking about these visions, we see that he has made the transition from his previous claims that dreams didn't make us kings, dragons did. He finally starts to realise the importance of dreams and prophecy, because he realises that his fate is depicted through these, and that if his fate is preordained, that the wrath of dragons really isn't going to do much to change it. And so he finally starts to recognise the importance of this in their pursuit of power and the crown and the throne, and the responsibility that comes with that, and that it goes beyond just personal ambition, that there's a bigger picture that they're all a part of. Like they say, their story, and they are all pawns and players within this story. And in response to this claim that he sounds like Viserys, he then says, "I saw it and we cannot withstand it, but somehow we must." And so we see that he is finally humbled by what he sees in this vision, and he recognises that they may not necessarily be the subject that this vision discusses, but that they are part of a bigger picture that'll play into the final, you know, the final phases of how this fate is dealt with. He then says, "The realm's only hope is in a leader who can unite it, and your father chose you." He then kneels and announces Rhaenyra. "Rhaenyra, the first of her name, I serve you until death or the end of our story," and all kneel. What a scene. What a speech from this man. He's becoming more and more likeable by the day. Daemon Targaryen, beautiful boy, we're so back. We're so back. He was remarkable in this scene. Remarkable. All of Daemon's scenes in this episode have been knockout. They've been outstanding, and I'm really excited to see what they do with this character in season 3, because it is going to go off. Him in all these battle scenes, now that he has this divine knowledge and this pursuit of fate. It's going to be very interesting to see the payoff of it, and to see if things turn out slightly different than he thought that they would. She reaches down and so he's holding her hand, two-hand holding her hand, all respect, pledging full fealty to her, and then she, in High Valyrian once again, looks down at him and says, "Leave me again at your peril." And he almost humorously responds and says, "I could not leave. I've tried, my queen." And it's kind of nice to see that they are having a return to form in their relationship, that their marriage is somewhat being restored now that he has made it very, very clear that his allegiance is with her and will remain with her, that he is steadfast, he is by her side, and she feels comforted and secure in her position now, knowing that Daemon and the Riverlands are at her back. Daemon then rises up and starts giving a speech, raises his sword in the air. He says, "For every one of us who falls, 100 of them, there will be no mercy." And he says the clip that we got in the season trailer, "We will fight for our queen," and all of them start to cheer and raise their fists in unison, all to the sound of the Black Queen. And she looks on approvingly. And it's so interesting because, you know, initially she was going from the scene of wanting to tear the usurpers using these dragons that she'd gained, and now here we go, for every one of us, 100 of them, there will be no mercy. The rhetoric has well and truly changed. And so have the tides. Then we get this scene with the sea snake and with Alyn of Hull. And Alyn has obviously been elevated to his first mate on a ship, and his ship is now ready to go. And so he's kind of trying to talk to him and be like, "Listen, you have all the potential to be a great leader, but you kind of need to be more leaderly." And Alyn very swiftly reminds him, "I did not ask to be a leader. You appointed this role to me and told me that it was an order that I had to carry it through, but sure, whatever." And Corlys is kind of like, "Oh, well, like, a lot of people would be very envious of that role and, you know, would seek to be in the position that you're in." And Alyn is like, "What, so you've come to remind me to be grateful? Is that what you're going to do after all you've done? Great, sure." And they then have this borderline confrontation on the pier beside the ship in public, where Alyn starts to go on about what it was like to be raised as a lowborn, common, small folk person without a father figure, and the fact that his father was a noble, that he had to work in, you know, the market selling fish from dawn to dusk, and that he would see Corlys coming in with his trueborn son, Rhaenyra Velaryon, and have this relationship with Rhaenyra where he was going around and was like, "Oh, pick out whatever you want, sweet meats that you can eat beside the fire after your large, noble family dinner," whereas Alyn was sitting here, not able to make ends meet, struggling to put food on the table. And, you know, for him and his brother, the suggestion is kind of implied that their mother either was also out struggling to try and make ends meet, or perhaps passed away or wasn't really around. So we still have a lot to learn about her and the story there. But it's obviously made very clear that their life was made increasingly difficult by the fact that their father was not around and was instead denying them, and instead was lording around with his noble family, and they had to live in squalor and destitution for their entire life because of the decisions Corlys made, and then his failure to step up and be the bigger person in the situation and continue to look out for his sons. Instead, he would rather reject them. And Alyn makes the suggestion, "The only reason you want anything to do with me now is because your true-born children have passed, and so you feel that I am somewhat beneficial to you. And if I am to survive this war, I will go back and live my life as I always have, and I want nothing from you." And it's clear that their relationship is very, very deeply wounded. And this whole time, Alyn has always had a lot of restraint when it comes to dealing with his father and talking about his relationship to his father, and even whenever it comes to his brother, who's obviously had a very shared experience but is dealing with it in a different way, he, you know, is very restrained and reluctant to even talk about these things. Clearly, he was restraining this whole time because he has a lot of things to say actually about his relationship with his father, and boy does he hold him accountable in this. So then we get this really interesting scene between Rhaenyra and Mysaria. They're on the balcony overlooking these two dragons flying around there. It's unclear who they are. It could be Seasmoke and Zyrax, it could be Silverwing and Vermithor, it could be Moondancer and Vermax, we don't know. But they're watching these two dragons anyway, just dancing above the water so beautifully. She is speaking to Mysaria about, you know, what they must do now, and Mysaria is like, you have done what people thought was impossible. The gods favour you. And Rhaenyra hasn't been appealing quite so much to the cult like god language and imagery in this episode, so it's a wonder. Is she much like those in real life who appeal to the gods? Has she now forgotten them now that she has gotten what she wanted? Has she gone back to secularity? It's hard to say, but Mysaria is still appealing to this imagery and saying the gods have favoured you. Rhaenyra is talking about how now she has to go out and she has to act, and she can't just rely on deterrence being the factor that plays into her ascension. Now she has to go out and actually do war, and that there will be collateral losses, and she suggests that her father wouldn't like this, and Mysaria is like, you have to do what you must to prevail, and Rhaenyra is like, yeah, but at what cost? What is the price of peace? And this is obviously a major theme throughout the episode, throughout the season, but she asks who will pay the price in my ascension to the throne, and Mysaria seems quite dismissive of the small folk, despite the fact she has painted herself out to be a champion of the small folk throughout the entire season and even last season. So it's very interesting. She likes to use the small folk when they're beneficial to her, but obviously in this situation she's willing to overlook the quality of life and life at all of small folk if it suits her cause. We then jump from this girlfriend scene to this ex-girlfriend scene, and so we have Rhaenyra up in bed, and one of her guards comes to say that she has a visitor, and she's like, yeah, sure, okay. She should be a bit more inquisitive about who's coming to visit her in the dead of the night when she's literally in her bed in Dragonstone. But alas, she gets herself ready and goes down, and she sees that Alicent is in her library, and so they start to have this conversation, and she's like, what in under God are you doing here? Alicent is talking about how she was really raised to believe that there was an order to things, and she spent her whole life toiling in service to her house in the realm in accordance to the order that she believed was necessary, and that she believed that she would find safety in this if she adhered to these rules that were placed before her. She says that she's lost her way, that despite her efforts to serve all of these things, it didn't end up in her favour, and she starts listing off, she was in service to a father, a husband, a lover, a son, and Rhaenyra interjects like a jealous ex-girlfriend being like, oh, a lover, this woman who has made virtue her banner, and Alicent is like, yes, I did, and she admits that she thinks that she did it in spite of Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra always lived in opposition to these values, these orders, these structures that were trying to be imposed on them, that Alicent adhered to and hoped to find safety and comfort in that, and she never did, whereas Rhaenyra always took this avenue of rebellion against virtue and abstinence, and yet was seemingly rewarded again and again for her misgivings and her misdeeds. And Alicent repeatedly found herself in positions of toil and servitude for her adherence to order and for following the rules that were dictated to her. They end up having this conversation, and Alicent essentially says, because Rhaenyra is making these allegations that Alicent has all this ambition, and Alicent says that she does not wish to rule, she wishes to love, and says that she wishes to take her daughter and her grandchild and to leave it all behind. Rhaenyra turns around, and this is like the one reference to biblical imagery that I just could not get enough of in this scene, because obviously we've seen in this whole season Alicent has been indulging all of these desires that she's had, with Criston Cole, and with her rebelling against her house, and with her kind of detaching from council and politics, and what this has kind of done to her character. And she recognised in the last episode that once she actually got away from it all, she started feeling more like herself, and like she was free for the first time in her life. And Rhaenyra is like, did you think you would come here and be absolved? Because all she's been looking for is someone to either deliver her some sort of retribution or resolve her of her guilt, and Rhaenyra is having none of it. And then Alicent, looking to strike some sort of deal with Rhaenyra, looking to appeal to her sensitivity to her past emotions towards her, and to try and reinforce herself as a reliable, source an ally in the situation to a degree if it's to secure her daughter, and her granddaughter's safe passage away from politics, away from this world, away from the realms of men in the capital that are restricting their life so greatly and ruining their life. Like Helaena was saying there earlier, she was much happier before she was queen. Alicent was much happier before she was queen. She doesn't want the same fate to befall her granddaughter, I'm sure. And so she starts to suggest, well, Aemond will join Cole in the Riverlands, in 3 days, and Helaena as queen will ascend, and so I will see that our guards throw down their swords and open the gates, let you in, and you will have the throne without bloodshed, which is obviously what Rhaenyra was advocating for when they met earlier in the season in the Sept, that she wished to avoid bloodshed, and by trying to avoid bloodshed she had to secure some sort of political manoeuvrings with Alicent, which Alicent earlier in the season had rebuked and said that it was too late. Now all of a sudden it is not too late, as if she couldn't have just had this conversation earlier, couldn't have had this conversation sooner, we might have had a resolve sooner. But essentially she makes this offer to Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra asks of Aegon what his condition is, and she says that Aegon is essentially broken beyond repair, but he still listens to his mother, and she could convince him to essentially allow Rhaenyra to take the throne in his place. And Rhaenyra's like, are you mad? Like, I can't just do that. I need to be seen to be powerful and to overthrow Aegon. I need to be seen with his head in my hand as I ascend the throne, to be seen as legitimate, because you have gone and usurped the throne and undermined me, and now I need to show that I have strength and that I can pay misdeeds upon myself with a feat of power, a feat of strength. She wants to show that there will be repercussions for going against her in this way, and she says, I must take Aegon's head for all to see. You know this. Choose. And see, to be honest, I don't know if I really like ride with what she's saying. I don't know if I really agree with what she's saying, because I feel like you don't need to say that. I feel like you don't need to say that, because no one has seen Aegon since Rook's Rest. No one has seen Sunfire since Rook's Rest. You could easily suggest that something happened to him, that he perished of his injuries, or that he is incapable of taking the throne again. And so they have brought back Rhaenyra, even though it would go against the whole line of succession thing. They could simply forfeit their rights. They could even make some sort of claims that they were usurpers and that they have no legitimate claim to the throne, and that instead they decided to do the right thing and let Rhaenyra take over, because Aegon is no longer fit to rule, and that the Prince Regent, as everybody's seen, is completely incapable of being a ruler, even a stand-in for the king, even regent. I mean, there's a million and one things that they could say. Like, Aegon has not been there. They could simply pretend he passed away and let him live his life in obscurity. They've already made the suggestion that he is like broken beyond repair and unrecognizable, so it's not like anybody would be really looking out for him and being like, oh, it's the king. Half his face is melted. He doesn't even have an ear. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like there are alternatives beyond, I need to go and behead this man, your son, choose. And then she says the line, a son for a son. Will you make your sacrifice? And so again, it's this whole idea of sacrifice being a massive theme running through the season, and again, something I want to look at further in another video, so I'll save most of my thoughts for then. But she is now demanding blood sacrifice in payment for her freedom, and that this blood will then pay for ascent to the Iron Throne, much like the tapestry in the beginning of the episode. They also made a change to the tapestry in the beginning of the episode too. They added in a bunch of Rhaenyra's new dragons, but I don't think they have Caraxes in there. But they have the dragons in there anyway, that show that, you know, the claiming of the dragon seeds was successful. So that was fun. That was a fun wee thing to note. So eventually, Alicent agrees to this absolutely treacherous situation, and she betrays her son and agrees that Rhaenyra can essentially come and behead him and ascend the throne in 3 days, and Alicent makes her peace with it, nods. Both are teary-eyed. Then Alicent says to fly to the Red Keep in 3 days and take your throne. That she had come there to appeal to the mercy of a friend who'd once loved her. Heartbreaking. It's a hard day to be a sapphic lady. heartbreaking altogether. And then she turns around and she says, for Rhaenyra to run away with her. Like, okay, if her and Criston Cole didn't want yet another thing to bond over in relation to their relationship with Rhaenyra, and I mean, at least this time she smiles in response rather than looking kind of disgusted like she did whenever Criston Cole suggested it. But it's just so tragic. It highlights such a tragedy. And Rhaenyra is like, history's going to paint you like a villain. Like, they're going to say that you're so cruel and unfeeling and cold. And Alicent is like, what must happen, must happen. She says, I am at last myself, and I wish to die unremarkable and unnoticed. There are a lot of references to death in this episode, especially from the Greens. You know, obviously there is references to death from Helaena to Aemond, and from Alicent to Rhaenyra, and from Cole to Gwaine. There's just a lot of references to death, and also Aegon talking about what's the point even loving. But yeah, whenever Alicent suggests that Rhaenyra should go with her, she does receive a little smile, and then Rhaenyra says, my part is here, it was decided long ago. Which I think again ties into this whole notion of fate that we're exploring in this episode. You know, that all of these fates are preordained, and so she can't just impulsively make the decision to run away with Alicent, as much as most of us would love if she would do that. Please, it would be her only redemption. Save these two women from these politics. So then we get a montage of all of these different scenes that were spliced together, which definitely feel like they should be split between an episode 9 and an episode 10. Like maybe like an episode 9 leading up to a battle and an episode 10. I think that they paced this out for a 10 episode season, and then they couldn't do very much in the ways of rewrites because of the strikes. And so we get a montage at the end of this for a couple of minutes where they basically show us where everybody is, what their situation is, and that everyone's on the move very much towards each other, and that a big battle is inevitable. They set up a number of big battles, you know, with pretty much every army that they show for season 3. Season 3 is obviously going to be very action packed, but again, we thought that about season 2, so hard to say. But I mean, they definitely can prolong this to season 4, I can tell you that much. So we get a scene of the dragon seeds getting their armor on. Then we get a montage of Alicent leaving. We get to see Rhaena running through the Vale, and she's chasing after this dragon that we feel like is Sheepstealer, and she is running through the Vale chasing him. And then we get a shot of the High Towers marching with Daemon and Tessarion flying above, and this is the shot that we seen in the trailer. This montage was essentially all the stuff that was in the trailer, but we've seen the shot of the High Towers marching, and it seems almost as if we are setting up for the Honeywine, the Battle of the Honeywine, with the High Towers and with Daemon and Tessarion. So very interesting. This is then followed by a shot of the Starks, and the Starks are marching through the Twins, and it's interesting because in a deleted scene they actually had Cregan Stark marching in the front during this, but they obviously decided to omit that in the final shot, and they have the 2,000 Greybeards going through the crossing, and while they march through, and oh my god, they look like very experienced and weathered fighters. While they're marching through, they play like an alternative version of the Stark theme. Oh my god, my heart. It was just breathtaking. I missed that theme so much. I really didn't think that I did until they played it. And it's kind of nice that they like bookended the season with like, you know, starting out with the Starks up in Winterfell on the wall, and then, you know, we have it at the end. We're getting these shots of the Greybeards and getting that payoff from the start that they've been travelling down this whole time, and now that we're nearing some sort of conflict. And so immediately following the Starks, we get a shot of the Lannisters. It's Jace and Lannister and their forces, and we get Humphrey Leffer and their forces, and it looks like a shot of, because they're marching forward and they stop and spectate this river, and I think this might be the Red Fork in the Trident, and so it's going to be interesting to see if we get a bit of Battle of Red Fork in the start of the next season, because they're setting up for Honeywine, Red Fork, and also another battle that we'll reference in just a second. Then we get Daemon in the shot that was also in the season trailer of him in full armour overlooking his forces that are in the Riverlands and looking very pleased with himself and how effective he's been after he wised up. This is immediately followed by a shot of Tylan on the Triarchy fleet, and what a sizable fleet it is. He is looking very confident with himself that his Prince Regent will be proud of his very swift and steadfast work. And then in contrast to this, we get Alyn and Corlys on one of those little rowboats going out to the Queen Who Never Was, Corlys's ship. And so we're seeing they're setting up for some sort of naval situation, perhaps a battle of the gullet, you know, since the Triarchy said on the morrow we will go for the gullet. It's going to be very interesting to see what they decide to open up with on episode 1 of season 3, because it's got to be something big. And then immediately after this, where they do their whole battle setup, we get a shot of Rhaena in the Vale, and she finally encounters Sheepstealer. Well, this wild dragon we assume is Sheepstealer, and he's eating away at this sheep and then spits it out and roars at her. I was horrified when I first seen the design that came out in the leaks, because again I seen this in the leaks, and he looked kind of just like a small gnarled dragon. Turns out he's actually quite sizable, and he has this weird like mottled pattern through his scales, and he has these wings that are almost like barren branches that are curved and almost broken looking. It's very, very interesting dragon design. I thought I wouldn't like it based on the blurry and unreliable leak imagery that we got, but in the actual episode I really, really liked this design. I thought it was really cool, and so I'm excited we have another fun new dragon. We did not get to see an attempt of her trying to claim it, and so there is still time if they wanted to maybe switch this up and introduce Nettles and make them besties, or something of the sort. If they wanted to introduce Nettles as Alyn and Corlys's mother, they could. It would suggest that will be where the dragon riding came from. They could do whatever they want based on the fact they got so much backlash about not including Nettles. They could fake us all out just to appeal to the audience. Good to see Sheepstealer. I quite like the design. I know a lot of people were still like, oh my god, it's so ugly, but I like him. I think he's a cute little guy. And then after this, we see a shot of Otto. And Otto is in some cells, and it shows a light coming down to the cells. And I'm kind of like grimacing and looking around. And I've seen two different things be put forward. One, that it's Larys has him trapped in the cells, and this is why he hasn't written to him, and this is why Otto hasn't got back to anyone, because Larys has him caged away somewhere. I don't know if it's a very good idea, but also Larys has enough seedy individuals that I'm sure he could get this scene to. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that theory. I mean, he is ambitious enough to do something like that, but then there's also the theory that I was working with for the past few episodes where I was like, god, I really hope that the Beesburys just get him. I hope they capture him and they keep him as a hostage and ransom him off to the High Towers, or they try and do some like eye for an eye, son for a son situation with Otto. I think that would be very amusing. Obviously I don't want Otto to die just yet. Resci fans would be an absolute loss. We've been lost without him in the last couple of episodes, but yeah, I mean, I've just been joking about that, and now it seems like we actually might have some payoff for it. Interesting. Very interesting. This is like the Helaena, you're gonna die here situation all over again, but sure. It'd be very amusing. Poor man, he doesn't look well. Not his usual dapper self anyway. Then we have a shot of Aegon and Larys fleeing the city in some sort of like poultry transfer wheelhouse cabin thing, and it looks like they are escaping to go to potentially Bravos, where Larys has all this money from Harrenhal that he has been storing over the years that he transferred to Essos. And it's so interesting because all Aegon had to do to become the realm's most prestigious sugar baby was fall to the sky and suffer third-degree burns over half his body. And now he just gets to live out the life in Essos being a sugar baby. I love that for him, as he should. It's honestly, it's the best alternative that he could have got, to be honest. Like, what's the other alternative? Let's sit in King's Landing, have his brother probably kill him. I think he made the right decision. Interesting to see where they're going to go with this, because obviously when Rhaenyra comes in 3 days and she sees that Aegon's not there, she's going to think that Alicent sent away her son to keep him safe, and she's going to feel that Alicent has betrayed her after, you know, giving this definitive word and making this gut-wrenching agreement with her. So it's going to be very interesting. And then we get these alternating shots of Rhaenyra in the library and Alicent overlooking the water outside Dragonstone before she goes back, and that is how they end the season, paralleling these two characters and their new perspectives, and one's desire to pursue the throne and the other's desire for freedom. And it's going to be interesting, the cliffhanger that they've left us off on for season 3. There's a plethora of battles they could open up with. There's a lot of political intrigue. There is a prince who has fled the city. There is a hand to the king who is in the cells somewhere. And yeah, we have a lot of people. We have a lot going on. There's a lot of places in this episode too, geographically. We moved around a lot. Covered a lot of ground. Covered a lot of houses. And so they're really just setting up all the big players for next season. And with the updates that we get on all of these locations, all of these players, all of the military movements and strategy that's being put into place to set these players in place for a larger battle at the start of season 3, it seems like they're really trying to present all of these figures, most of which are small folk, as pawns. They're all players on the board, as our girl Alys would say. And so, I think I'm happy enough to leave that off there. I'm going to make some more videos later on in the week. And we're going to look at the new trailer, which they aired just before this episode of House of the Dragon, for the new Dunk and Egg show. And right, did they let Duncan the Tall have an Irish accent? Because the actor playing him is Irish. And they have like one line of dialogue for him in the trailer. And it sounds like he might have just spoken in his beautiful Galway brogue. I love Galway so much. I'm going to Galway in August. Oh my god, it's August now. I'm going to Galway in like 2 weeks time because I just love Galway. And so if we finally get an Irish main character in a Song of Ice and Fire show, I'll be delighted. Absolutely thrilled. Like, HBO please. Like, we deserve it. Anyway, obviously and they're filming here too, so I suppose it would make sense. It'd be nice to get a little bit of payoff, a little bit of accent representation. Then I won't have people in the comments making fun of my accent as much, because they won't have a leg to stand on. So I think that's probably the video we're going to do later in this week, is going through that and, you know, speaking about what's been going on, maybe looking at a bit of film and stuff. And then next week I'll probably do like a full wrap up of, you know, a review of the season rather than just individual episode reviews. Maybe a bit of a recap of, you know, here's everything that happened in the season, and then afterwards doing a full review of it. So I might try and pick a day or two this week and just sit down and binge the full season so that I can go on with all the information that I have now and rewatch the episodes. So I think that will be useful. And then after that we'll jump into different character and thematic analysis and different scenes that need a bit of further unpacking. So again, anything you want to see, any theories you want me to go and do, any character studies you want me to do, let me know. I have lots of ideas, but also obviously I want to dive into whatever you want to hear about. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I want to keep this as collaborative as possible. You know, I want to interact with people that are commenting and whatever they're interested in. I want to also have a nosy into. I think it's a really nice way of building community and having like a nice collaborative atmosphere here. It's been really interesting in building, and so I'm really interested in continuing that. And so it's been absolutely lovely to chat to you all, as always, and I hope you all enjoyed the season finale, and we will be diving into it in the next couple of weeks and picking it apart and going through the whole season, and then we'll get into some weird stuff and some weird theories, some weird characters, weird themes. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you all are too. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you in the next video, and that you stick around in the break between this show and Dunk and Egg, and then the subsequent season 3 of House of the Dragon. And yeah, until the next one, thank you so much. So I'll see you then.